is called What Game Publishers Do That the Rest Should Too. Not only does it rhyme, but it also has some awesome speakers. So without further ado, let me introduce John Hook, the VP Growth, Homa Games. Please take it away.
Awesome. I think you're one of the few people that actually pronounced Homa correctly. I'm going to call up the panel. I'm really excited today. We've got such a diverse range of people on the panel, different types of games. So every question you're going to get a completely different answer. So guys, you want to come up? So let's do some really quick introductions before we get going, so people have a bit of context on where you're coming at the questions from.
Hey guys, I'm Jean-Sebastien Laverge, VP Data and Growth at Tilting Point. Tilting Point is a mobile games publisher based in New York City. We help independent developers grow their games. We work on a lot of different titles from casual to mid-core and hardcore, and we work on titles like Star Trek Timeline, NASCAR Heat, or Almost a Hero.
Hi, I'm Jay Sarno. I'm the head of brand and marketing creative at Product Madness. As you know, we are a social casino companies, primarily slot machines. Yeah.
I'm Robert Garfinkle. I'm Senior User Acquisition Manager at Nexon M. We're the American branch and overseas publishing arm of Nexon, a large Korean gaming firm. We have a large portfolio of titles that we assist our internal and external development studios bring to market, including Dominations, Hit, Dynasty Warriors, Darkness Rises, and many more.
And I'm Rujul Patel. I'm SVP of Publisher Development and User Acquisition at Ogury. Ogury is a mobile journey marketing company. We are a French startup, and I just started the US region to focus on helping publishers, developers monetize their apps.
So to kick off, we're going to talk about team structure. You'll notice on the panel we've got a real mix of job titles, and from a hyper-casual perspective, you know, for us, UA and monetization is the same person. Could you talk a little bit about how you structure your teams and the roles that they do?
Yeah, so on our side, I have 3 teams: our data team, our growth marketing team, and live ops team. So the growth marketing team is really focusing on the user acquisition side, and I put the monetization side within the live ops team to really work on improving the retention and monetization of the products.
Sure. So we have 2 offices essentially. The main hubs are in London, obviously here in San Francisco as well. But in London, it's primarily product, whereas marketing, user acquisition is based in San Francisco. Our creative team is closely seated by our UA team and data science team. So there's a lot of data-driven decisions, which is the top layer for our funnel at this point.
On our side, we split things rather granularly as a large company. We have all publishing core functions in the Emeryville area, including marketing, data analytics, and legal. When it comes to monetization, these things are split between a number of different teams, with product leading the front on making the major decisions of whether or not it's an IAP or ads-driven game. UA is really vetting and analyzing monetization trends to ensure long-term profitability, and that's how we split that. So.
Yeah, at our end, we have people focused on helping with monetization for developers, and then we have people focused on helping those same developers go and acquire new users. What we are trying to do is we are trying to keep all those people who interact with the developers on the same team. And in a way, we are trying to drive more optimization, better efficiency, and more alignment of incentives when we do that. So for an example, somebody who is helping a publisher drive monetization through ads can also advise them on how to utilize that revenue to drive growth. So in our case, we try and keep everyone on the same team. We might have different individuals helping them with different things, but they are part of the same team, and they work pretty closely with each other.
So let's dig into some of the specialisms that you have. Let's start with UA. Can you share some of the new media channels that you've been testing that's been driving some various levels of ROI for you?
Yeah, on our side, the latest new exciting channel is not a new channel, actually it's an old one, but we have been testing the new Reddit platform that released a couple of weeks ago, and we are seeing some interesting results there.
On our side, I mean, obviously in gaming, it's playables. I mean, it gives you a glimpse into the actual game itself before you're actually downloading the game or installing it. Another oldie but a goodie is video, but at this time we're doing narrative long form, which proves to be a little bit more on the higher click-throughs, higher conversions. It's just you're telling a story for your essential game essence.
I think that over the course of the last year or so, we've seen a lot more consolidation in the media space. There's not a lot of very large new channel partners. What we're seeing is an explosion in non-traditional formats. There's things that are rewarding users engaging. There's micro-influencers that are driving value through things like misplay. I think the large proprietary inventory formats who are not yet in the game, with Reddit and Twitch being most notable, are kind of the next big steps in the UA ecosystem, but I think we're still a little ways off with them.
Yeah, on our side, we are, rather than focusing on new media channels, what we are doing is we are focusing on data. We are bringing data that the publishers haven't had access to before, data that is outside of what users do within their app. We are trying to complete the picture for them, for their users, on who they are outside of their app, and what does their journey look like, what does their app universe data look like. So we are trying to bring that and try and apply to whatever media channel that the developer wants to work with.
Jay, maybe you can start with this one. So there's been a lot of talk at this conference about creatives, and you just mentioned playables.
Yep.
So, I mean, really, out of all the different disciplines, how important really is creative? Does it make or break a UA campaign?
I mean, honestly, I think at this point it's very crucial. Honestly, it's very mission critical. Obviously, that goes into the whole discussion about layering data and then creative. So, I mean, we're data-driven first, and that's what's interesting about my job, is that we're looking at insights, so you have to be left and right brain, right? You're validating creative intuition with data. And otherwise, you're just designing things that are not performing. You can spend a week, 2 weeks on something that's beautiful, that looks awesome, then it takes, right? Or you can spend a few hours with the data science teams or the UA team and design something that'll perform and just convert and monetize people, right? So for the most part, as a designer, look at data. I think that's where the industry is going, right? I mean, there's stories where you have a UA team in this country, in this specific area, and it's hard for them to converge into some sort of some sort of understanding when it comes to what we need to design. And that's the biggest thing for us, that we sit in the same room, whether it's brainstorming with data science or obviously with UA as well. So it's different avenues kind of converging into one.
So you mentioned a couple of sort of old but new platforms. Are there any specific creative formats that, beyond playables, that you've tested and are working, or is it actually going back to basics?
I think honestly it's going back to basics. Obviously we did this test where it's a video versus a playable. The video will always outshine at this point, at this juncture. I mean, we're focused on slot machines, so that's what we're obviously testing, right? I mean, and what's interesting about playables is that the rule is, low CTR, high conversion. So your actual ad needs to actually reflect what you're presenting to the user once they install your app. So yeah, I think playables, that's the way to go at this point.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of experience working with the top brands in the world. So what we see is we see creatives as a way for the users you are targeting to window shop your product.
Yeah.
So creative is definitely very critical. It could be playables. Yeah, data shows that more engaging or more interactive the ad is, it performs better. But honestly, at the end of the day, you have to look at your product and see what creative fits the best. And a poorly executed playable can really underperform a well-done video. So for us, it's more about hey, what's your product? How do you want your users to interact with it? And we bring the data that allows them to make the decisions around what they need to do with it.
I feel like there's quite a range in what playables can bring to a game. A lot of it really depends on what the gameplay format kind of looks like. Oftentimes, for games that have a more straightforward or simplistic or portrait view, it's a lot easier to make playables that are fairly compelling. For more mid-core games, it can be much more difficult to make compelling experiences, especially with all the restrictions on the size of assets. And I think that ultimately video is still, for now, the dominant format.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think it's really come down now to as the media buying becomes more and more automatized, and like networks like Google, Facebook propose solutions where the media buyer does nothing and they optimize everything. The fights become more about the creative you're providing to the users and understanding what audience and where you are reaching them to put the best creatives that fit this audience and placement is becoming more and more critical. So even on Facebook, we are doing different type of creative per different placements. It's the same thing on Google, it's the same thing on DSPs, and I think building up those creative for the right audience on the right placement is becoming more and more critical on the market.
I love that you just put Google in their place and called them an ad network. I think that's great. So there's a lot of talk about data. So how are you making sure that you're not serving users with irrelevant ads? Can you share some learnings on that?
Yeah, I can kick it off. Like, you know, for us, as I mentioned earlier on, we are a journey data company. So what we do is we try and understand what the users are engaging with outside of a given app, right? So we look at not just what they have installed, because that never tells you the whole story. Because everyone, if you look at every individual user, they don't interact with more than 10 or 15 apps a day, and that is stretching it, right? So the more important part is like not just knowing what they've installed, but what do they engage with on a daily basis? How long do they engage with it, right? Also, if you are interested in your own users, you want to understand what they were doing before they land in your app, what they did after they exited your app, and what else are their interests, right? So we try and take that data to figure out how to match that user with the best possible ad that an ad network can provide. Now, granted, not all ad networks are, you know, capable of taking that data and making a decision on it. But from the monetization perspective, like with our monetization platform, what we try and do is we try and cut out ad networks based on what we know about a user. So if it's a user who has consumed a lot of rewarded video ads, maybe they are a good match for a CPI campaign. But we also look at what does their app universe data tell us. Like if they only play a certain specific type of games, then we try and cut out campaigns that are just not going to convert for them. Right. So you don't end up in a scenario where you have this user, they are giving you a good session, and you are just hammering them with the same ads, you know, 30, 40 times, and they're never going to convert, right? So we are trying to bring that. We are able to do that with campaigns that we manage for sure, and we are trying to recruit partners who can start making those decisions. So it reduces waste across the ecosystem. But it's great for user experience. You know, if they are seeing a variety of ads that are more relevant to them, then you know it works better for everyone. So for us, it's all about data.
Yeah,
that's how we go about it.
I mean, to touch on that, that's definitely data, right? I mean, at Product Madness, we have the luxury to actually go into our back tooling and see the session times, and then you know pretty much user behavior. And based off of that, you know, if you go into our games, you'll see multiple slot machines, but then you can see the session times, what the frequency in which they've played the app, and then from there we can serve ads directly to them, hyper-targeted to that actionable creative. And that falls in line in with purchase behavior and everything else.
Definitely, we use player segmentation to increase or decrease ad pressure inside the products. So most of our products are mixed or hybrid products where they have monetizing through in-app purchase and ad monetization. So being able to propose or increase the pressure based on the player behavior to maximize the monetization is where we are building it.
So that's a nice segue into monetization. So let's start with that. Can you share a little bit about the strategies? Obviously, you've got very different types of titles that you're using to attract players for IEP versus ads.
Yeah, we so it boils down on the capacity of the ad networks, and we are trying to build a solution where we're going to optimize to bring in users that are more IEP driven or more AI driven, and based on the optimization we're using, it's going to be a different type of LTV, a different type of player behavior, and we're going to try to adapt the game to each type of players we're getting for each source. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess on our end, there's really, on top of UA KPIs and data science KPIs, creative KPIs there's two forms. There's a short form and long form. The short form is obviously CTR times CBR. I mean, that gives us a chance to see what ads are potentially going to perform. And the long-term ones are the ROAS, right? I mean, that's a 2-3 week maturation, and we can see which ads are actually funneling users to actually play the game and monetize for first-time deposits. And from there, that's when the whole cycle of iterations and reskinning and the badness happens.
From our perspective, most of our games are very heavily IAP driven. Very little ad revenue at all. It's probably like more than 95% of our overall revenue is through IAP. And that necessitates a lot of deep funnel engagement. You need to understand that the users that you're bringing in are interested in the game, and you have to be very careful about where you're fishing for users, because different pawns have different basic characteristics. There's lots of different demographics that are alive in the ecosystem that is the mobile gaming world, and it's very careful. It's very hard to be careful about where you're pulling in users. We do a lot to focus on things like lookalikes where it's available, or programmatic media buying methodologies for finding the right publishers with the right general audiences. But ultimately, it's all in-game data that is feeding us this data.
Where do you see monetization going? When we were talking downstairs, you had a really interesting perspective about this hybrid model with sort of subscription IP. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, subscription is definitely growing. I think that there are some risks to it. It's a model that is getting a lot of attention from media because there is this kind of natural potential for abuse, I guess you could say. But with a hybrid subscription and IAP-driven model, you can kind of bring back the days of the MMORPG where you had this like 30-day cycle of active users that are retaining for a very long period of time, which hasn't really been replicated on mobile to date, but we're seeing a lot of inroads in the subscription models within core gaming, especially coming out of APAC.
And from there's some of our great partners here. From a kind of a monetization tool perspective, can you share any sort of hacks or tools you've built internally? You know, you found a new partner you started working with that's really helped drive, an uptick in revenue for you?
Yeah, on our side, I'm going to start. So like in the past years, I think the two main growth we've seen is one on this making our games a bit more hybrid, so increasing the share of ad revenues in games that are most generally IP-driven has been pretty successful. And the second thing we're experimenting on right now is more on the re-engagement life cycle of users and how do you do smart re-engagement in a profitable manner, and that increase ARPU actually.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think live operations cannot be underestimated. Having short, intense engagement around specific events can drive a lot of IAP in a very short period of time.
Yeah, from where we sit in the stack, we try and do a couple of things. Number one is we take a very consultative approach with developers to help them figure out what are the best integration points for ads. And the idea there is that it's not just about showing an ad, but it's also about helping them drive more conversion towards IAP, because those two things have to coexist. And we have a lot of data that shows that if ads are done the right way, then it eventually leads you to improve your IAP economy, right? So that's one thing we do. And then we do a lot of heavy lifting on the back end, because everyone has by now heard that, hey, header bidding is arriving, but not all ad networks are ready with that header bidding solution. So we have automated quite a bit of the back end of our platform to sort of create an environment where these ad networks can participate in sort of an header bidding environment. Gives them more opportunity to deliver ads and deliver ads at price points that they're comfortable with, rather than trying to work with developers to get deals in place, which are always not very efficient. So that's where we focus on, because we want to help the developers maximize the revenue, but also make sure that they continue to grow their IAP as well.
I think for us, aside from trying to garner new users, a big focus for us is re-engagement, right? These churned users that are potentially whales that kind of just we need to reactivate. So there's a lot of focus on that on our end.
Does anyone else want to share any re-engagement CRM strategies they have? I mean, we're under a lot of pressure, right, to keep our games up there.
Yeah, we are a technological company, so we are always trying to build new tools that are going to help us automatize and improve the performance of the games of our developer partners. So on the re-engagement side, we are building a tool right now that is mixing player segmentation and channel of engagement and A/B testing and automatizing the efficiency of the player journey to get them to re-engage with our apps through push notification, emails, advertising.
I mean, the question really is, how do you re-entice that user to just play a game again, right? I mean, do you add new features? Do you add new models? Like, it's an endless question, essentially, depending on the content.
Just to tack on to that, I think that we really focus a lot of our retargeting efforts around content updates in the titles. And so while I think that there might be a model for persistent, ongoing retargeting, maybe in mid-core, the users are burning through content at a rate oftentimes that can't be met by just a persistent campaign. So a lot of ours are relatively short, but we do regularly spend.
So we want to finish on, we've talked a lot about data and we've done really well not to mention fraud. So I'm going to open-ended question because everyone defines it differently. If you can share some examples or practices of what you're doing to kind of combat, manage fraud.
So when it comes to when it comes to ad fraud, I think that the most clean and easiest solution is to look for the MMPs, kind of the referees, the mobile measurement platforms to act as a referee in this case, and to start to identify fraudulent activity and to bring everyone kind of up and to a higher playing field on a fraud. And to that end, I think Adjust has done a really good job on their solution, which prevents a postback from being delivered in certain circumstances that are all very well documented. So I think on the ad fraud front, there are solutions that are really starting to become very impactful. There is, however, a large potential for fraud in user behavior itself. Like, users themselves are very good at finding exploits and finding new ways, and we have whole teams devoted to this, that there is no real tool or solution that I know of on the market for just yet.
Yeah, that's true. Means that, the way we look at it is from again where we sit in the whole stack. Means we tackle fraud in two ways. Now, individual user fraud is extremely hard to catch and really address. I don't know of any technology that does that. But from where we sit in the ecosystem, we try and filter out any supply that is suspicious, so that our advertisers are not wasting their dollars on that. And one way we do that is, like, we always have our first-party SDK verify, and the type of data we collect tells us a lot about a user. So anytime we see that, hey, the user doesn't have a lot of App Universe data, or the data looks suspicious, we start filtering those impressions out. So we avoid the impression even being served. And obviously, we also support the ecosystem of third parties that are out there. And whatever the advertiser needs, we try and work with those third parties to make sure that whatever supply we are bringing to the table is all certified, not to be fraud. But yeah, honestly, it's always going to be an ongoing battle, especially on the performance side. There is a lot of money to be made, so more needs to be done as far as installs are concerned.
Yeah, I think fraud's always been around. I mean, for us, it's internal audits and just getting prevention at this point. I mean, that in itself is in its infancy, but I mean, there's a lot in terms of market value, in terms, just having that.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We're just going to hand over for questions.
So, great. Great session, guys. Great session. You feel free to ask your questions on slide.do, sli.do, for any questions. I don't see any, but I have a few of mine that I'll ask this esteemed panel. First of all, retargeting, the paid side of it, not just push notifications, emails, but how are you, first of all, what % of your budget is going to retargeting versus UA, and how are you measuring the efficiencies of those, like something which is scientifically, not just watching the organic baseline or the DAO grow? Yeah, any indication, directions, any in-house tools, or how are you guys doing it? Would be helpful for this. And throw in some numbers. These guys are here to learn. Concrete numbers, guys.
So, concrete numbers might be a little hard, but
Percents.
I would say that it's a relatively small portion of the overall. We're talking less than 10% generally, but it does necessitate a lot of the use of internal modeling. You can't really use the out-of-the-box retargeting modeling in most circumstances. It just won't be effective for you. You'll end up kind of reattributing revenue from your existing channels just to the retargeting partner, and it kind of gets muddied in that way. We use an incremental lift model that was developed by our data science team. I don't know if everyone has the luxury of a data science team, but if you do, that's kind of the way to go.
Yeah, we developed an internal solution to measure our re-engagement efforts. So we A/B test on every segment we're trying to address to measure our efficiency, and then we make sure that the spend still is profitable. So we need to hit specific ROAS goals like any UA campaigns or re-engagement campaigns.
Yeah, I'd say for hyper-casual, it's less about re-engagement because retention rates could just fall off a cliff on like day 2. It's more about kind of cross-promotion in our own games, and that's only possible once you get to a certain scale, of course. We're at 1 million DAU, so right now the focus is more on cross-promotion rather than re-engagement. And I think a lot of us are in a bad UA habit of all trying to steal players from each other's hyper-casual games, which is what we were talking about earlier. But I think we need to look beyond hyper-casual for where hyper-casual players are.
I think I have a question here. The old-fashioned way. Feel free to use Slido, but here we have a question.
Yeah, I couldn't find it. So if there's users that have spent a couple $100 and then you haven't seen them for 30 or 60 days, what kind of activities, push notifications, emails have you guys been using to re-engage churned spenders?
I mean, for us, obviously there's push notifications, but there's a lot in through email as well. But really just really hyper-targeting those users because we get content every week. So it's really content-based on what features we're going to inject into the game, see if they get re-enticed to play it. I think that's the biggest thing for us is around that form of channel communication.
So email is the best way to re-engage?
It's not the best way. I mean, there's an amalgamation of things, right? There's different combinations. Some people are more responsive to email. Some people are responsive to push notifications if they're opt-in. Or you just, based on device ID or user ID, you just target them and say, hey, this is your favorite slot machine. This is the serial one that's coming out next. So just being smart about their behaviors and just focusing on that.
Yeah, and in hyper-casual, I'd love someone to come back and spend $200 after like 30 days. But I think for us, it's more, to answer your question in a hyper-casual context, it's more about trying to build deeper immersive like layers within the game as hyper-casual is kind of maturing to keep people coming back to playing the game. But we're not yet using push or any of the tactics that you mentioned.
And so as the guy said, it's all about how do you message the re-engagement and what you're offering the users to come back to play your games. And the second piece we're doing is about through machine learning, let the machine learn when to re-engage them at what time range. So do you need to wait 7 days, 14 days, 60 days, 30 days, whatever, and for which channel to use. So you just set up, we build a system where the machine is fed all the parameters and just optimize based on the user's behavior.
And when you say channel, do you mean email or push?
Email, push, and ads.
Okay. Which is the best for you guys?
It depends on the player segments and like what you're trying to achieve.
Still no questions on SLI.do, but okay, good, the old-fashioned way.
Question for Joel.
Yep.
You had mentioned that you were talking about the importance of tracking users before they enter your gaming and then after. Could you expand upon that a little bit? Is there any like tools or best practices that you found to have success?
Yeah, so to caveat it, we are not developers. So yeah, so but what we have is what we offer is an SDK that developers install, and they can use it just to collect that data, or they can use it to get monetized as well. But yeah, that SDK allows us to keep a track of what the users do outside of that given app. So we don't see anything inside of the app, but we stay in the background and we see what else they are doing. And plus we have modeling that we have built for more than 400 million users now, so we can also predict some of their affinities as well. So we take all of that data and then we provide you that information. So again, yeah, that's an SDK that you install, and you get access to that data on demand.
Okay, so I mean, these guys are here. So one last question, a quick round on what is coming up in 2019. What should we be aware of? What is going to be a success? What's going to be a flop? Very quickly.
Selfish one for me. I think you're going to see some acquisitions of hyper-casual studios. Hopefully us. That'd be great.
Yeah, we are still looking at very closely at streaming solution for our games, and we are trying to monitor that piece of the market because we think it's going to explode maybe this year or next year. We don't know yet when.
I think within the social casino space, I mean, obviously it's a mature industry. You're going to start seeing slot machine and the publishers integrating, casino content with just, whether it's just progressives or just journey type games. It's going to be a hybrid of just to get engagement and new users and cohorts.
I think on the user acquisition front, 2019 is going to be a year where automation starts getting picked up in a real, much larger way. There's lots of tools for doing bidding automation at this time, but a lot of them are in their kind of infancy. And I'm very interested to see when we reach a point where some DSP type technology is being brought to even larger pools of the UA ecosystem.
Yeah, on our end, we think that the data that has been used forever by the brand side of the business, the brand advertisers, the audience-based philosophies that they have had, I think that's going to arrive finally into user acquisition at a much higher level and much sophisticated level than where it is right now. And we think that that's going to be a big difference maker for 2019. As UA gets more and more competitive, you would need that extra layer of data to make sure your strategies are still effective. And I think that's what we see happening in 2019.
Great. Give these guys a big hand of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great insights. So we are now breaking for lunch, and then when we come back at 1, we have a very good session on live ops, retention, all that kind of fun stuff. And we've got a bunch of very, very good sessions lined up on data privacy, in-app monetization.